Good day, Summoners. This is Raabemaster bringing you a guide to owning with Ryze in 5 minutes. Let's begin. Ryze is a mage who deals almost entirely magical damage from his abilities, which scale off of his maximum mana as well as ability power, and is most commonly seen in the mid lane, although he can go top due to his tanky build. He is picked because Ryze is one of the few champions who has the ability to hyper carry at full build due to his incredibly efficient builds, natural survivability, and low cooldowns, which give him some of the best sustained DPS in the game. Skill build. Ryze has the same skill build no matter which lane you play him in, unless of course you are jungling Ryze or supporting Ryze, which in that case I suppose Rune Prison would take priority, but in those cases even I can't help. The skill build order priority is his ultimate, then Overload, then Rune Prison, and finally Spellflux. Overload takes priority over the other basic skills because it is Ryze's main damage spell and is on an incredibly low cooldown, and gives Ryze a lot of cooldown reduction, which is extremely useful when comboing with other spells. Rune Prison is next because the damage and snare duration both scale well with each skill point invested. Spellflux is leveled last because its DPS is not as good as Overload, and it doesn't offer the same amount as utility as Rune Prison does. I recommend not putting your first skill point into Overload unless you are sure that you won't need Rune Prison to either secure a First Blood or save yourself from giving it up. After that, get points into all your basic spells by level 3 because your passive lowers your cooldowns per spell cast, so the more you have at your disposal, the better. Itemization. Ryze's power comes from the fact that he has one of the most synergetic item builds in the game, because most of the items that give a lot of mana also provide strong defensive stats, allowing you to build damage and survivability at the same time. However, until Ryze can get those items up, he is squishy, has terrible mana sustain, lacks burst damage, and is armed with quite an attitude. Ryze has a few choices for starting items, such as buying boots, a sapphire crystal, or a crystalline flask, all with the respective amount of health potions, which are all great choices. For the early game item choices, Ryze loves crystals almost as much as Taric. Red, blue, and purple gems are all fabulous decisions. After this, Ryze is a special case because he builds offensive and defensive items at the same time. So instead I'm going to break it down into core and situational. Ryze has a staple core build which is almost non-negotiable. For the first items Ryze players like to get are Tear the Goddess, Catalyst of the Protector, Glacial Shroud, and Boots and an Amplifying Tome. Of course, you should build these in the order that you need, but getting them all at some point in the game is very strong. These items will be built into a number of possible items which will together create a late game Ryze build. From this core build, you get situational items based on the threats of the enemy team and what your team needs. The tier can be built into a Seraph's Embrace or a Mura Mana. Seraph's Embrace can be picked up if you need the shield to survive team fights, but Mura Mana is by far the most popular pick because it substantially increases your DPS. The Catalyst is to be made into a Rod of the Ages, and it is a strong pick if you are doing well, but if you find yourself in need of the magic resist or are against a burst champion such as Annie or LeBlanc, Banshee's Veil will give you some much needed survivability. Glacial Shroud should be built into a Frozen Heart as the armor and cooldown reduction are both amazing on Ryze. Iceborne Gauntlet is an option, especially if you go Mura Mana, but Ryze has a long auto attack windup and the slow is much less significant for ranged champions, so it does not come highly recommended. Boots on Ryze have a few options due to his weak early game. Sorc shoes are best if you are winning your lane and you need more damage. Merc treads are strong versus burst heavy mages and if there's a lot of crowd control on the other team. Ninja Tabby have become more viable in Season 3 due to the influx of AD mid laners as well. The Amp Tome, probably the item you've all been scratching your heads about, can be built into a number of items, which is why I included it into the core build. Void Staff, Will of the Ancients, and even Ryze are a good pickup. The Ryze, especially if your team is lacking CC, the Will of the Ancients will probably be the choice if you need more survivability in teamfights, and the Void Staff if you're just rocking everyone and want to do more DPS than your ranged carry. That 6 item slot can go in many possible directions depending on what items you opted not to get with your core items. If you got the Mura Mana, pick up an Archangel Staff maybe. If you got the Rod of the Ages, you might want to get a Banshee's Veil. It's all just what you didn't pick up the first time, go back and look if you want to pick them up now. Also, there are other options such as an Abyssal Scepter if you don't like the Banshee's Veil and want a little bit more magic pen, the Warmogs if you aren't quite tanky enough, or even a Death Cap if you're feeling dangerous. Tips and advice. Ryze is not a facial champ like many people seem to think. You have to constantly be on the move between spellcasts due to Ryze's limited range in order to stay in front of your target or keep a distance from assassins or bruisers. It is important for Ryze to build a lot of cooldown reduction. The goal is to cycle your abilities so that there is a queue in between every other ability without too much delay to take advantage of his passive. Ryze does not naturally build mana regen, so denying him the blue buff both early and late game will really hurt his sustain and damage as the 20% CDR makes a big impact. Even late game, Mura Mana eats through his mana pool faster than me through an all-you-can-eat buffet. His ult may make his damage AoE, but Mura Mana active still applies to the primary target. A good Ryze needs to be calm in teamfights to combo effectively. The most common combo in teamfights is usually QR, QE, QW, Q. But it depends on a lot of factors. Are you chasing? Do you need the AoE damage immediately? Could the spell vamp come in use later on? Think before you combo. Because all of Ryze's abilities are skill targeted, he is a good counter mobility champions like Ari because he is too skilled to miss. Ryze's biggest weakness is the early game. Burst champions like Annie walk all over him until late game. Whereas champions with stuns, snares, silences, or just do more early DPS than him can make his laning experience terrible. The biggest counter to Ryze is Cassiopeia because her DPS is not only higher, but she can also stun him, preventing him from comboing her. Ryze is a short-range mage. While his tanky build helps him stay alive in teamfights, he still needs to be in the thick of things to do damage. Thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe for more awesome content. Now take this knowledge and stick it somewhere safe.